tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Putting a price on Canada's pandemic response and the tens of billions of dollars in questionable payments.
We're having to be very discerning with what we purchase.
Plus, the scramble to keep up. The pinch rising food prices are putting on BC charities and the huge increase in need.
And I can't wait to hopefully be able to play in that one day.
And dreaming big, how the announcement of a new women's soccer league in Canada is already inspiring young BC players.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Body cameras could soon be a reality for Vancouver police officers if council votes in favor of the idea. It's a move Mayor Ken Sim and his party campaigned on, promising to increase public safety and transparency for law enforcement. But as Michelle Gazoub reports, there are concerns about the massive price tag and privacy.
This is footage shot on a body camera. Vancouver police officers could be outfitted with this technology by 2025 if the motion passes.
This is a very important public safety initiative, and also it will enhance our transparency and accountability so that everyone benefits from this policy.
Body cameras have long been promoted as a way to decrease police violence, and they're supported by many victims of police brutality and the watchdogs that monitor police. But recent studies have found cameras don't result in significant changes to officer behavior.
In city after city, what we see is inconsistency with the footage, inconsistency with it being turned on or off, difficulty accessing the footage when needed. So a lot of challenges actually in the implementation that hinder it being a useful tool.
We don't know the cost for Vancouver yet, but a similar move in Toronto comes with a price tag of more than $34 million. Vancouver police say the huge cost of the equipment and data storage has prevented them from acquiring the cameras in the past. They also cite privacy concerns for those filmed who haven't committed a crime and say the tech raises questions of how the data would be processed in criminal investigations. That question of privacy and just how the footage would be used, also a worry for civil liberty organizations.
We also are very concerned that it could have a chilling effect on even people's willingness to protest or join protest or even watch, and what they might be willing to do in their day-to-day lives in public spaces when there's a police officer there.
With an ABC party majority on council, the motion is expected to pass this week. City staff will then research the cost of the equipment and the data storage and would try to answer questions like how long the footage gathered would be stored and when the cameras will be turned on. Michelle Gazoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, in New Westminster, a routine traffic stop turned into the discovery of roughly $2.4 million worth of drugs in a vehicle. Officers arrested the driver after noticing a damaged vehicle driving along 12th Street near Stewardson Way on Sunday last week. They ran the license plate and learned it had all been involved in a fail to stop the day before. But when they pulled the driver over, they got more than they expected, uncovering more than 13 kilograms of drugs, including fentanyl, crystal meth, heroin, and liquid codeine.
I would say this is not for personal use. I can't speak to specifically how this would be distributed within the Lower Mainland or where it would be distributed. We are very thankful that the member was able to actually recover this amount off the street.
U.S. police say the driver has since been released pending an investigation. No charges have been laid. Well, it's tough news for cyclists and encouraging news for drivers. Last night, Vancouver Park Board voted to remove a dedicated bike lane through Stanley Park for now.
Show of hands, please. All in favor?
The bike lane was installed in June of 2020 as a temporary way for cyclists and cars to share the road. But since October's municipal election, talk of removing it had increased with the new mayor and council. The motion asks that the lane be removed in time for peak holiday season to prevent traffic and increase accessibility for those with disabilities.
They're just regular folks that like to use it. There's seniors, there's disabled cyclists, and they all enjoy it. And now we're just removing it for all of them now. It's very unfortunate.
To come up with a permanent solution that's safe and not temporary, that's surrounded by orange cones, is the way to go. And I'm actually looking forward to our following year.
Stanley Park will now return to 2 lanes for cars, and a plan for cycling infrastructure is in the works. Those who voted in favor say removing the lane would make the park more accessible to everyone, not just bikers. Well, the Canadian men's soccer team may not have achieved a win in Qatar, but it remains a milestone nonetheless. The men's soccer team played at FIFA World Cup after a gap of 36 years. And now young BC players are feeling inspired, but not just because of the men's team. It's really because of news of a women's professional soccer league in Canada. Renee Filipponi has more details on some of the teams involved.
For these young elite players, the prospect of getting paid to play here in Canada is exciting and much anticipated.
The fact that it took so long is also a bit crazy, but we're also so thankful that we're seeing progressions in the women's sport.
The Vancouver Whitecaps will be home to one of 8 teams in a new professional women's league, which plans to launch in 2025.
And they've always grown up with this idea of I have to go play in America before I come home. So I think for them it's reality that they could be playing in front of local fans.
Christine Sinclair, it's 2.
Soccer superstar Christine Sinclair has been pushing for this for years and broke the news on The National alongside her former teammate Diana Matheson that they plan to start the league.
We were at one point those little kids looking up to male athletes. And it's time to change the narrative.
Matheson says she has secured owners for clubs in Vancouver and Calgary, but needs 6 more major backers.
Women's sport, women's professional sport is a new industry. It's growing faster than men's sport, and it will keep growing over the next 2 decades.
During the Tokyo Olympics, more than 4 million watched Canada's women win gold, the most viewed event of the Games in this country. And while the World Cup has shown what a draw men's soccer can be, there is untapped potential for women's sport, says this expert.
But I think if you look broadly throughout North America at the traditional commercial sport business model, we are a bit saturated on the men's side.
It's time for a women's professional league in Canada.
Organizers expect to draw nearly 4,000 fans to attend each match. Fans who could be cheering on players like Claire Logan.
I'm really excited for that, and I can't wait to hopefully be able to play in that one day.
A new opportunity on home turf. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, those looking to brave the elements on Mount Seymour will once again need to book ahead if driving. Vehicle day passes are returning this winter. Anyone looking to explore the trails there can book passes up to 2 days in advance. The free vehicle pass will be required for Upper Mountain parking lots starting December 15th. That pass system was launched last year after parking saw overcrowding. Johanna Wagstaff is away tonight. Kuljeet, I know you and I are not ones to hit the slopes per se, but any après ski yet this season?
Not so far this season, but it is time to get up to a mountain if you want to do some skiing and snowboarding. And the reason why I say that is just before 4 o'clock this afternoon, we had a snowfall warning issued for Whistler. So they're going to get about 10 to 20 centimeters of snow starting tomorrow afternoon into Thursday afternoon. So you'll see a little bit of a red right there, and that's what that snowfall warning is for Whistler. Snowfall warning in effect for Prince George as well. 10 centimeters there down towards Revelstoke, up to 20 centimeters, and a wind warning along the coast. Port Hardy could see winds of up to 70 kilometers an hour tonight, so it's going to be quite cold. And the snow will continue for Prince George tomorrow under -5 conditions. Some sun for Williams Lake and -6. Sun and a mix of rain and snow for Kelowna tomorrow as well. What we're going to get is rain starting tomorrow, and it's going to stay with us for quite some time. Just want to mention today's high was only 3 degrees. Average for this time of year is closer to 7. So the rain starts tomorrow, stays till Saturday, and it's going to bring about 10 to 20 millimeters of rain every day until Saturday. So get ready for that. The next dry day isn't going to be until Sunday or Monday. So clouds this afternoon. We didn't get that snow that we were expecting, and sunrise tomorrow right before 8 a.m. with clouds, and then some rain will start tomorrow afternoon, and 5 degrees will be our high. It'll be cold and wet tomorrow. Anita?
Cold and wet. Bring it on. Thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
With the cost of food expected to go even higher next year, local not-for-profits and charities are bracing for even more people forced to use their services. As Joel Ballard reports, both organizations and families are feeling the pinch.
Employees at the Quest Outreach Society are busy organizing boxes of food. The not-for-profit operates a handful of markets across the Lower Mainland that sell groceries at reduced costs. They've never been busier.
We've just hit 172,000 client visits for the year, and that number has been a sharp increase, especially if you compare it to pre-COVID numbers.
Much of their product is donated, the rest covered by fundraising dollars that no longer stretch as far.
We're having to be very discerning with what we purchase, especially over the last 18 months.
The cost of food has risen significantly in 2022, and now more grim news according to the latest food price report.
Very much like 2022, we are expecting food prices to continue to increase, unfortunately.
He predicts the typical family's food bill for the year will go up by more than $1,000 in 2023. The culmination of multiple factors: climate change, supply chain issues, the cost of labor, the war in Ukraine. And the prices have hit the wallets of British Columbians hardest.
BC is known to actually have the most expensive food basket in the country.
The crunch is being felt everywhere. As a busy mom of 4 kids, Ingrid Benavides always strives to pack a healthy variety of foods in her kids' lunches. But lately, that's getting harder and harder.
Prices keep jumping and increasing.
She says her regular products are up not just by 50 cents or $1, but by $5 to $10.
It doesn't matter the store where you go. It doesn't matter, what you do. Even if you're using, coupons or waiting for something to be on sale, everything is just crazy expensive all across pretty much every store.
Benavides worries she may soon be forced to make cuts.
Even though we both work full-time jobs, they were not going to be able to afford some type of foods. They will have to probably stop buying even fruits or veggies.
Difficult choices as the cost of living just keeps climbing. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
For nearly 2 decades, Langley City and Langley Township have been served by a joint police force. That arrangement, though, could soon come to an end if the township councillors have their way, arguing a separate detachment could better serve the community's needs. For more on this potential police parting, we're joined by none other than our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, probably the only person who can talk about this. Justin, it's a tale of 2 Langleys and now possibly 2 police forces.
Yeah, and like you said, we'll see. What Langley Township Council voted on last night was to ask staff to come forward with a report to explore what would it look like if they separated from Langley City when it came from policing and had their own separate detachment. What would the cost be like? What would the logistics? What would the timeline be? And then after that, they will vote one way or the other. But this was something that has been talked about by councillors for a while, finding that logistics sometimes don't benefit them. We spoke to the mayor of Langley City today, Nathan Bahal. He said that he knew that this was coming, that they're willing to and happy to talk to Langley Township about this and to do whatever is necessary, but said that if you split up into 2 different police forces, there could be logistical issues.
One of the interesting things that I was thinking about, and of course everything is doable, is Willowbrook Mall. So Willowbrook Mall, 2/3 of that is in the township of Langley. 1/3 of that is in the city of Langley. So if someone calls 911, who's going to respond?
I mean, we all have different jurisdictional issues that happen with 21 municipalities in Metro Vancouver. Those two municipalities split their police force. Add that to the list.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. Other communities are also weighing the pros and cons of having their own RCMP detachments.
Yeah, and it's interesting right now, if you look across Southwest BC, there's a heck of a lot of different municipalities with different debates happening where policing is right at the front of it. Of course, Vancouver, we have both the budget for the next year, 100 new cops, cameras on them as well that we talked about in the top story. Victoria and Esquimalt currently separating their police forces. The Langleys now may do so as well. Surrey, they're debating whether to go to back to the RCMP or keep going forward with their own independent force. In the springtime, an all-party legislative committee for the provincial government suggested that a provincial police force would be a good idea to discuss because you would get away of all this patchwork of different forces and debates. We'll see if more municipalities continue to have these sorts of discussions, if the province starts talking a little bit more about that as a possibility to consider.
Justin McElroy reporting for us tonight. Thank you. Well, BC guitar makers have won a prestigious global award for Best Acoustic Guitar of the Year.
This means so much because it's been so much work that's gone into it over the last 16 years. MMR magazine wrote something that I thought was really cool. They wrote, every now and again, a smaller brand manages to sneak up and eke out a win in categories traditionally dominated by the big boys.
Yeah, and this is pretty cool. Riversong took home the gold with their winning model, the P2P River Pacific. They beat out big names from around the world like Fender, Gibson, and Yamaha. Kamloops Riversong guitars won in the Musical Merchandise Review's Dealer's Choice Awards. Congrats. The 33rd anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre, 14 female students in Montreal shot and killed by a man who said he hated feminists. Coming up, commemorating the victims across the country, including here in BC. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Several women are making their names known in the NHL and other men's professional leagues. The NHL has hired at least 6 women as assistant general managers since the beginning of this year. Here's a look at some of them who are breaking barriers in a male-dominated sport.
Rebecca Johnson scores! Hockey is my life. I've been fortunate enough to be able to make a career of it. I'm Rebecca Johnston. I'm player development with the Calgary Flames. Player development is basically developing the prospects, so players that will hopefully one day play for the Flames, and just really trying to help develop them as players and as people, and just help guide them to becoming pro athletes. Watching the Flames the last 8 years I've been here, and I'm a huge supporter of them, so it was a no-brainer for me to try to get in with the Flames and just see maybe something that I would want to do in the future. There's a lot of great females out there. There's a lot of opportunity, and it is great to see, and I think the Flames are doing a great job with diversity and having that inclusion, and I feel very respected here, so it's been a great experience.
I'm Danielle Fajita, and I'm the skating coach of the Calgary Flames. I started with the Flames about 5 years ago, just working with the veterans in their off season, and really proved myself that way apparently, and was able to get a full-time contract. The biggest gains that the players make, not just in the ability to skate better, it's the knowledge of how to skate better. It's the technique and the science behind their movements. My players don't usually know that I come from a figure skating background. I've made it a very big push in my skating to make sure that they can't see me as a figure skater, that I don't look like a figure skater out there, that I actually look more like a hockey player. There isn't any difficulty for me being a female out here with the guys. Quite the opposite, actually. These guys, for whatever reason, they confide in me.
I'm new, so I'm just getting to know everyone now, so hopefully I create great relationships where they can open up to me, and any struggles that they may have, I definitely want to be able to help, because I've been through it all really with my career, and I feel like I can give that guidance and reassurance and just be able to help them overcome that.
As human beings, we have to prove that we have, one, the experience, two, the knowledge, and the ability to transfer that knowledge into results. And women are starting to do that more and more, and I think that's why people are starting to take notice of it, and why you're going to start to see more and more females active in the sport.
It's almost weird to think that I'm a role model. I still think it's weird to this day, and I've been on the national team for a while now, but I really do take it to heart, and I really want to show these girls how important it is that girls can do anything.
Today marks the 33rd anniversary of the mass shooting at École Polytechnique in Montreal. On this day in 1989, a gunman motivated by hatred of feminists walked into the engineering school and murdered 14 female students. 13 others were hurt. A wreath ceremony was held to remember the victims with flags flying at half-mast at the school. Another ceremony took place at dusk, the time the first shots were fired. The anniversary was declared the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women in 1991. Meanwhile, the Premier, First Nations elders and others gathered in the rain outside the BC legislature this afternoon. They lit candles to remember those 14 women in Montreal and other victims of violence.
Mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunties, cousins, daughters. Today we lift up our hands to all women in all walks of life, and we say thank you. Thank you for the love in your heart you share.
Premier Eby says there is no room for hatred or violence in BC, but acknowledges there is much work to do to stop it. Now, that night, December 6th in Montreal, still scars all these years later.
Given there's still a heaviness to that name, Polytechnique, consider this. An ad from Canada's largest firearms rights lobby for a sale of clothing and other items with the promo code POLY. Imagine how that sits with the likes of Natalie Prevost, a Polytechnique survivor, so profoundly wounded she had to learn how to walk again. She spent decades advocating for stronger gun control.
Voilà.
So we met in Montreal to talk about that work and the belittling and online abuse and threats that now go with it.
Get that out of here with your gun ban recommendations, you useless.
That's one.
That's one.
If you think this gun ban would have stopped this shooter, I feel sorry for you. You're garbage.
Just a sample and far from the worst of what's directed her way.
It's violent and it's sexually aggressive. Sometimes it even threatened my mother.
Your mom?
Yeah. Why? Why do they have to threat something to my mother? It's so cheap. It's so small. It's not the view I want to have on my society, on the people with whom I live. So my strategy, even, I don't know if it's a good one or not, it's to stay naive. It's to stay a bit far away from it. I'm really lucky. I have colleagues who help me. Just don't go.
They shield you from it.
Yeah, because I don't think I can handle it.
Is it any wonder her friends and family want to protect her? That December night in her engineering class, when gunman Marc Lepine burst in, he separated the men and women and killed the women. Natalie Prevost was severely injured, shot multiple times. Still, she tried to convince him to stop shooting, encouraged her friends to play dead to save their lives. Even emerging from hospital, she was bold enough to talk, to try to protect and inspire.
I ask every girl in Quebec and everywhere in the world who wants to be an engineer to keep this idea in their mind, because engineering is a great profession.
She spread that message for decades, as well as one for more comprehensive gun control.
We built something for the safety of all Canadians, so the memory of my classmates are not lost, and I'm very proud of that.
Consistently, she tries to hold governments to account. Frustrated, she quit the Firearms Committee in 2019 because for all the encouraging words, action she thought was missing.
What does the finish line look like?
We will have a mandatory buyback. We will have something regarding magazines. We finally have a proposition regarding a definition of assault-style weapon that will be integrated. It's not perfect. We're not as strong as New Zealand, but we are going there. We want to have a better security for all Canadians. That's my goal, and that's what I want.
A recent post buying into a trope of online trolls that Natalie Prevost may not be the victim the world knows her to be. Mass shooting survivor has become a title that's pretty hard to believe, the post reads, and goes on to suggest she could not possibly have been shot with the weapon she suggests.
You went through so much, and
they are lies flung like dirt, including that she's paid for her activism, which she emphatically denies.
We have been accused, and even one of the candidates for Prime Minister in Quebec, to be liars and to be using what happened to us for our own credit. And what can I say to that? We had to survive. We had to cope with it. I had to repair my wounds, to learn to walk again. I cannot understand. There's some place where I don't have any capacity to fight back.
Must be hard wearing the mantle of being strong and inspirational. Expectations pile on.
You symbolize the interrupted dreams of my classmates.
Every year after the shooting, she's been there, standing alongside female engineering students, pushing politicians, sometimes encouraged to run for office.
I really contemplate the possibility to do that, because contribution for my society is at the heart of my life. I really think I could have done a good job as a representative.
But the threats are so aggressive and the criticism so aggressive, you're saying,
the
forget it.
impact of all social media on representative is so important that I don't think that my mental health will resist it.
Saving some of her strength for her own health, maybe never imagining she'd find herself a type of target again. But if some want Natalie Prevost to stay quiet, they can forget it.
Those 14 women are still with us, alive in a way.
After all she's endured, she says she will not be bullied into silence.
Canada's pandemic report card, an effective response, says the Auditor General, but that comes with criticism over wasteful spending to the tune of $4.6 billion. It doesn't stop there. After the break, why millions of COVID vaccine doses are being thrown out.
When I was a kid growing up in Winnipeg, I used to dream of finding ice like this, being able to skate down a hill just on this beautiful sheen of ice. They don't have hills like this in Winnipeg. Unfortunately, back then, I didn't have a car.
With streets like this, your car acts as if it's on skates. After the snows yesterday and deep freeze today, many city streets were just not fit for any kind of traffic. This sign warns some motorists to stay away. So you put this sign up
last night.
Last night,
yes.
And there would be how many accidents?
4, including one on my friend's car, who left it overnight.
Well, you just drove from the other way.
Yeah, and I don't live in this area, so I didn't realize, and I was putting my car in second, going really slow, and I was fine until I just came down right in the center here, and it just went out of control, and I couldn't do anything about it once you start sliding. Luckily, I only hit the mirror.
So we went to the driving experts at BCAA. Lee, I'm driving down a road. I suddenly have to brake. I hit the ice, and I start skidding. What do I do?
Well, I guess the main thing is, first of all, and it's hard not to do, but don't panic. Don't jam on the brakes. Try the old squeeze braking technique. Just ease on and ease off a little bit. Let the car have a little bit of play. If you have to steer, try and go in the direction of the skid, but try to avoid sort of jerky movements. If it swings one way, don't automatically swing the other way, or you'll find yourself in a situation you can't get out of.
Snow tires and snow chains also help. Good advice, but hindsight is always 20/20. Where was your car then?
A tire in the corner.
Oh, right, yeah, and you lost your light here, right? Fortunately for Michelle, it's a company car. So in terms of driving tips for your fellow motorists, what can you say?
Stay at home. That's the best thing to do.
And if you do insist on driving, take it from me. Whoa. Beware of the ice. Bob Nixon, CBC News, Vancouver.
Are you okay?
Tonight, Canada's Auditor General delivers her verdict on the country's pandemic response, calling it effective but also wasteful and expensive. As the CBC's John Tusker explains, it's not clear if the government can even recover the billions of dollars.
Canada's Auditor General said the federal government's pandemic relief programs may have worked to protect people from joblessness and poverty, but
billions of dollars have gone or may have gone to ineligible recipients.
The questionable COVID payments were sent out through the Emergency Relief Benefit and Wage Subsidy programs.
We found that overpayments of $4.6 billion were made to ineligible individuals. And we estimated that at least $27.4 billion of payments to individuals and employers should be investigated further.
She said while the waste was to be expected because the programs were set up so quickly, she's critical of how slow Ottawa has been to claw back the payments. The government says it sent out 1 million letters asking for proof of eligibility.
We're trying to work with Canadians in very difficult time, and I wouldn't mistake a lack of aggressive pursuit for not doing it. It's just we're being compassionate.
Conservative MPs say the flood of COVID payouts is partly to blame for the surging cost of living.
This is another example of that inflationary waste that is forcing more and more Canadians into food banks.
Along with COVID benefits, the Auditor General found waste in the government's vaccine program. At least 13 million doses expired before they could ever reach an arm.
Now it's about minimizing wastage and better inventory management going forward.
I think this is very problematic that much money was wasted, that much vaccine, that many doses of vaccines were wasted.
Millions more vaccine doses are expected to expire by year's end, and time is running out for the government to recover those dubious COVID payouts. By law, they only have 36 months to try and get the money back. The Auditor General said today it's likely billions of dollars in payouts will never be recovered. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
As the number of respiratory infections continues to climb across the country, more and more kids are getting concerningly sick. As Deanna Sumanak-Johnson tells us, healthcare systems are struggling to keep up.
It was a parent's nightmare, a 3-year-old with high fever that wouldn't come down, and one hospital after another too busy to treat him until they found a walk-in clinic that could.
Going around and just trying to find help, begging on doors. Like, I can't believe that in 2022 that's what we're doing.
A surge in kids' respiratory infections, especially the flu, continues to stretch resources at pediatric hospitals across the country, with admissions 10 times higher than usual.
12 children's hospitals are tracking data. In the last week of November, we saw 223 admissions to the hospital for children suffering from side effects of the flu. This number would typically be 10, 11, 12 kids a week.
The evidence of crisis is everywhere. Ottawa's Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario bringing in the Red Cross this week to support staff. In Calgary, a pediatric hospice discharging its respite patients because staff were urgently needed at the local children's hospital. Stories like those prompting anger and vague responses from the authorities.
We're going to make sure we're listening to the best advice from experts and public health authorities.
Help is coming. Our system is under strain. There's no doubt about that. And this is not just unique to Albertans Children's Hospital.
We still have time to blunt the impact of this transmission by getting people vaccinated.
Experts say concrete solutions are needed now.
We have to, number one, increase capacity in our healthcare system so we can absorb these things when they happen. But we also have to try to prevent these things from happening in the first place.
Experts say the best thing Canadians can do to help protect their kids is to give them the flu shot, something only a small number of kids under the age of 4 have received. And while there seems to be no political will to bring back mandates, many experts recommend masking, especially when in crowded indoor spaces. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The Assembly of First Nations has appointed retired Senator Murray St. Clair to try to ease internal tensions within the organization. St. Clair is the former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and his role as mediator will start in the new year. Olivia Stefanovich has the story.
A show of unity
as tensions between the national chief and members of the Assembly of First Nations Executive Committee threaten to overshadow their meetings once again.
We made it, chiefs. Thank you for continuing to stand by me and the regional chiefs.
Roseanne Archibald says they've overcome many barriers since the last assembly when First Nations leaders reinstated her as national chief, an extraordinary move after the executive committee temporarily suspended Archibald because of a workplace investigation launched against her.
We will not perpetuate this ongoing conflict, and we will avoid unhealthy situations and seek the help of a mediator.
Archibald says Murray Sinclair, the former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, will be appointed to that role in the new year.
We can't spend another minute, never mind a Chiefs Assembly, in turmoil. Our people are watching.
As Archibald moves forward, friction continues behind the scenes. CBC News has learned the AFN's chief executive officer is the 5th complainant to file a bullying and harassment complaint against Archibald.
I think the damage is just done and it's not repairable.
Even with the help of a mediator, some chiefs aren't confident the relationship between the national chief and executive committee can be fixed.
Perhaps the AFN explores a new national chief if we can't work together, because they have to work together.
But others are standing by Archibald.
I really see the national chief doing that important work. She's not just in Ottawa, so I really think we do need that connection.
The next few months will be a big challenge, a chance for the national chief and executive committee to prove they can set aside their differences or remain stuck in turmoil. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
A controversial new law in Indonesia that targets both citizens and foreigners. The harsh new penalties for sex outside of marriage coming up.
Loving you is easy. Loving you's wondrous and pure. Shout it from the rooftops. How long must I wait till I see your smile? Caught up in the moonlight, caught up in the sparkle in your eyes. So wicked, and I know I should go slow, but it's not a made away. I became a stranger to myself, digging in my heels and hoping time might be kinder if I waited out. But nothing came from wanting. I became so small and insecure, didn't know the cost of all I'd lost till I found it fresh and new. Again with you, I'm on fire. Shine like a starburst into the sky. Oh, the fury of desire. Loving you's wondrous and pure. Shout it from the rooftops. How long must I wait till I see your smile?
To Montreal now, where a simple idea is helping hundreds of people in need. It's called the Wall of Kindness. People were asked to donate jackets by hanging them on hooks set up at 2 outdoor locations. Kobina Aduro is looking at how some of the recipients responded.
Maya Camaro was the lucky one. She had the first pick. It took some time before she found the one.
Now that I try it on, I see it perfectly fits me. It matches my style, it makes me feel beautiful, makes me look rich too.
The jackets were collected through the Wall of Kindness initiative. People were able to donate jackets by putting them on hooks at 2 locations in Montreal. Today, it was the people on the receiving end who were able to take them off the rack.
It's just like shopping. I was able to cycle through different styles, and I picked one that I liked.
In all, 1,000 coats were collected, 300 jackets through the wall itself. Another 700 were gathered by the group Renaissance. The nonprofit CEO says donations went beyond what they expected.
What's sad right now is we still need to do it because we shouldn't be doing that. People shouldn't be not having a jacket in the winter. Everyone should have it.
Oldbury Mission CEO James Hughes says for many, it's going to be a tough winter. He says tonight alone, 4,000 Montrealers are experiencing homelessness, a quarter of them sleeping on the street.
This goes some way to try to closing the gap between, how they see themselves in the world and what the reality is, because Montrealers are incredibly generous.
For Camara, that generosity gives her hope.
The feeling is just unexplainable. It's just brilliant, spectacular.
Renaissance and the Oldbury Mission plan to continue the Wall of Kindness next year, this time expanding to more boroughs across the island, so more people can have that same feeling of joy Camara has in her new jacket. Kobina Aduro, CBC News, Montreal.
Yeah, it's really nice to see that. And we know the need has never been greater. Also, a lot of really good work happening here in Vancouver to distribute blankets, jackets, socks, all the things. So
yes, give when you can and where you can.
Yeah, and we need to, right? Because it is pretty cold.
It is getting pretty cold. We're actually way below average. It should be around 7 degrees for this time of year. We were only at a high of 3 degrees. So if it does feel cold out there, there is a reason. The rain held off today. We were supposed to have wet conditions coming in this afternoon. It held off, but not for very long. By tomorrow morning, we're going to see this low pressure system come in and bring all kinds of rain, and it's going to stick around for the next several days. So rainy days, 4 or 5 days in a row at least. If you're like me and you forgot your rain boots today was a good practice day. Tomorrow, don't do that. The rain will stay with us until about Saturday. Here's what we can expect during those few days of rain. Up to 40 millimeters of rain for Vancouver, up to 50 for North Vancouver, and about 35 for Burnaby. Over the next several days, those are the totals that we're going to see. The forecast over the next few days, temperature is going to be sitting steady at around 4 degrees for Vancouver, -3 up in Williams Lake. There is a snowfall warning in effect for parts of the Caribou region tonight as well. And taking a look at the long-term forecast, like I said, it's going to rain right until Saturday. Overnight temperatures around 1 degrees. Next dry day is Sunday and Monday, but overnight temperatures will be sitting at -2 and -3. So it is going to get quite cold in the coming days, wet and cold. Anita?
Okay, thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
Well, thousands of people in Indonesia's East Java are on high alert after a violent eruption at the island's tallest volcano. Authorities have imposed an 8-kilometer no-go zone around Mount Semeru, forced evacuations of entire villages. The 3,600-meter volcano erupted on Sunday, and volcanic activity continues to remain high. The eruption follows a series of earthquakes in the west of Java, including one last month that killed more than 300 people. Well, staying in Indonesia, a controversial new law is drawing attention worldwide. Sex outside of marriage will soon be illegal for citizens and foreigners. As Sasha Petrusik explains, it's a particularly hard hit for the LGBTQ communities.
After little debate in Indonesia's parliament, it moved to outlaw any sex outside of marriage, with a penalty of up to a year in jail. It isn't easy to accommodate everyone, says the minister in charge, but we had to make a decision. The new laws won't come into effect for 3 years. With the largest Muslim population in any one country, the move has strong support from conservative Islamic leaders, increasingly influential ones. The laws also target blasphemy and make it a crime to insult the president or hold unauthorized demonstrations. Loud, opposing voices quickly gathered, saying the country is tarnishing its image as one of the more democratic in the region. It's a setback for Indonesia, says this activist. It could make us all criminals, says this man. Young people are especially at risk. So are LGBTQ couples, since same-sex marriage isn't an option in Indonesia. And foreigners who visit Bali's popular beaches can also be charged, a decision that may hurt Indonesia's tourism industry.
You'll see a whole bunch of people who choose not to go there.
In practice, tourists may be less vulnerable, since any complaint for sexual offenses has to come from a close relative. Still,
because the economics of it, you're going to give up a lot of money for, a principle.
The last time Indonesia tried to ban sex for the unmarried, huge demonstrations forced the government to backtrack. It could happen again if the country doesn't give consent. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
In Africa, Somalia is on the brink of another brutal famine brought on by the worst drought to hit the country in decades. Somalia is in the midst of its 5th failed rainy season, and the severe lack of water has decimated the crops and farm animals Somalis rely on for food. While many countries in the Horn of Africa have also been hit hard by drought, Somali's plight has been made worse by armed conflict, with large parts of the country made almost inaccessible to aid groups. Andy Harrington is the executive director of the Canadian Food Grains Bank and joins me now from Chilliwack. Andy, we mentioned the Horn of Africa there, and you've recently come back from the area. Can you talk about what you saw?
Yes, thanks, Anita, for having me on. I was in Ethiopia and also in northern Kenya, which is kind of covered by this incredible drought that's happening at the moment. And so I saw for myself on journeys where I was traveling for sometimes hundreds of miles across Ethiopia and also northern Kenya, just crops that were wasted because of the drought. The drought is actually a long one. It's in its 5th failed rainy season, and that's unprecedented in modern times. So we saw failed crops. We met people that were in great need. I was able to visit some of the food stations that we have set up as part of the response in Ethiopia. And we're able to see the difference that's making. But there is a terrifically strong response from Canada and people there, but there is so much more to do. Things are really quite desperate.
Well, let's talk about that response. What are Canadians doing right now to help those in need?
Well, there's been a response right across the Horn of Africa. So our organization, Canadian Food Grains Bank, has projects in all of the 4 countries that have been badly affected. So that would be Kenya, South Sudan, Somalia, and Ethiopia. In Somalia, which has been particularly badly affected and is actually within weeks of being declared a famine area, we have 5 different projects that are responding. We have 65,000 participants in those projects that we're feeding. We're also very involved in child stabilization for malnutrition. And malnutrition is hitting particularly hard in Somalia. In fact, something like 54% of all the children at the moment in the country are malnourished. So we're setting up stabilization stations through our partners on the ground in order to see those kids get nourishment that they desperately need.
What is it like to see that in person?
Very, very difficult. The partners we're working with on the ground there, an organization called Tricare, have reported that normally they would see 150 children coming into those malnutrition stabilization centers a month. They're currently seeing in excess of 450, which is almost impossible to cope with, because the kind of stabilization we're needing to do in those centers is really with people close to death. And when you're dealing with children, that is a very difficult thing. In fact, on the CBC, the National, last week, they featured one of these projects. And that has really been very, very difficult for our partners to deal with. For myself, having been in some of those feeding stations, it's very difficult to sit with a person like the woman I spoke with, who is telling me that she's had to skip meals for herself and her husband and decide which child they will feed. And so we're glad to be there, but we know there is so much more that needs to be done. And there's a real response from the international community that needs to get much bigger.
Wow, that's so shocking to hear. I can't even imagine. Listening to that, I'm sure that many people watching now will want to know how they can help here in British Columbia.
Well, there's a number of things they can do. First of all, we always ask people to advocate, to write to their MPs, to let people know that they care about what's going on. But also, especially at this time of year, donations are needed. There are many organizations that are working in this area. We're working there as well. And you can actually make a donation on our page, foodgrainsbank.ca/donate/Somalia. But I'm actually more interested in making sure that Canadians really understand that amidst all the crisis of the world, there are people, human beings, just like you and I, that are at the moment in the throes of a terrible crisis. Hunger is a terrible, terrible thing. And starvation is, well, it's an awful way to die, putting it bluntly. And at the moment, we're on the edge of seeing hundreds of thousands of deaths in Somalia alone. And so we're asking the international community to respond. We're asking the people of BC to respond as well.
Andy Harrington is the Executive Director of Canadian Food Grains Bank. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Anita.
It's space to celebrate the history of Chinese immigrants to Canada and their descendants. Up next, we'll take you to the Chinatown Storytelling Centre, where one dedicated volunteer is filling the gaps on her own family's history with the help from strangers.
It's a cold November morning, and Lester Balfour is taking a group of boys to check his snares, about a 40-minute drive north of Norway House, Cree Nation.
Oh, yes, we got a walpus.
We got one wapos, eh?
Wapos is Cree for rabbit. For the boys, they're not only learning to survive off the land, they're learning their language, their culture, including traditional snaring techniques.
I usually measure with my fist kind of thing. When the rabbit runs in and gets caught, and I kind of twist this so it won't slip down. So when it gets caught, it'll...
And the idea being is it runs through, it gets tighter and tighter around its neck.
Yes.
There are lessons to be learned with trapping. You aren't the only ones looking for rabbits.
Someone got our rabbit.
Oh, look.
What animal got it?
A rabbit? Another rabbit?
No, I think that's a lynx. Just left a piece of the head left. So a lynx got it. So there's other predators. So we're not the only ones that are trying to eat the rabbit.
Balfour has been doing this kind of work for years. Over the summer, he taught over 100 kids how to trap, fish, and prepare their catch, which included building a smoker.
We smoked fish there. I think we smoked about 64, and it took 2 days because it was a big smoker. And we fed the community, and that's what we do.
Got a wapus.
Balfour dreams of one day opening a cultural camp, saying that when he was younger, he could have benefited from something like that. For one boy out that morning, he says being on the land is good for his self-confidence.
Myself, I feel like I'm just myself, like feeling better, staying outside.
Balfour does all this work voluntarily to encourage kids to go back to a traditional way of living.
And that's what I'm trying to show the kids, to go back to the land and eat wild food.
Balfour says a traditional diet with homegrown vegetables and wild meats helps him stay healthy. And for the elders in his community, it's a lifestyle they've always known.
I do feed the community with fish, and we're going to get some rabbits too. When we get a lot, we'll post and say, pick up your rabbits. So we feed the elders. So
a practice of sharing he's instilling in the kids.
Here, you can have a rabbit.
Okay, thank you very much. Good meal.
Giving back to community, carrying traditions forward. Stephanie Cram, CBC News, Norway House, Cree Nation.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Enjoy CBC Radio 1 while you're on the go with the free CBC Listen app. Get live and on-demand access to your favorite CBC radio programs like The Early Edition with Stephen Quinn. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Chinatown's Storytelling Centre is honoring one of their most dedicated volunteers with an award. The Storytelling Centre celebrates the long-established history and culture of Vancouver's Chinese immigrant community. Emma Chang says she delights in guiding visitors through shared history to uncover their personal connection to Chinatown.
Hi, I'm Emma Chang, and I'm a volunteer here at the Chinatown Storytelling Centre. I've been here for a year, since day one when we opened a year ago. I hang around for visitors to come and greet them and see if they would like they might welcome a little conversation or a little bit of introduction to the overall exhibits, and then offer my assistance along the way. You know, is there something here that you connect with? Is there something you're looking for? Sometimes it's just stories that triggers conversations. So we have people who say, you know, my great-grandfather came, he worked on the railroad, and you get that story. Or people coming in and saying, oh yeah, the head tax, we paid the head tax. People start telling you their tales, like, you know, I used to come to Chinatown with my grandmother. We used to go shopping here. I heard a story about how, you know, they used to come down. They didn't have a lot of money, so it was a very special thing to come out and have dinner or have a meal here in Chinatown because it wasn't expensive, and you know, it welcomed families. So so everybody has a story.
I think what makes Emma unique as a volunteer is her enthusiasm and passion for what we're trying to do here at the Chinatown Storytelling Centre, but I think she also has a passion for people. And some of the other volunteers that I've talked to as well said that, you know, they really, if they can make people feel comfortable, then they can find out more about their own stories. Chinatown is an important part of our collective history here, not just really for Vancouver, but for all of Canada. And that it is a kind of an example, if you think about how we extrapolate from this one group. I think the experience of many immigrant groups that really help make Canada the multicultural country it is.
It's all about connection. For me, it deepens my understanding of Chinese Canadian history. I meet lots of people coming through, all with their stories. I come from a boomer generation where our parents, and not just Chinese, of course, everyone from that generation didn't want to talk about the hardships they survived, right? From the wars and everything else. And so a lot of details weren't filled in. And so now, from the exhibit, all those details are filled in somewhat, and from meeting a lot of the people, I get to talk to people about their experiences, and I can really kind of relate to what my parents went through.
That brings us to the end of our show tonight. But before we go, we have some good news to share. CBC's Food Bank Day donations have surpassed the $2 million mark. Now, Food Bank Day was on Friday. It's an annual tradition, but the donations continue to pour in, and you can actually still give until December 31st. Really exciting tonight. So we just want to thank you for your generosity. You can go to cbc.ca/BC to find out how to donate. Have a wonderful evening.